Hello and welcome back to my channel What If Deku 2. Join us as we delve into the realms of fanfiction and fantasy, bringing you the best stories and discussions. Today, we're kicking off part 5 of our series, What If Deku Had Godlike Power Surpassing All? If you enjoy this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more content in the future. The author of this story is DripBayless from FanfictionNet. All the relevant links are in the description. Feel free to say hello to the author on their profile. Now, let's dive into the fanfic. Tamura Shigaraki and Kirigiri watched the conclusion to Izuku's match in Visible Thought. Well, it was actually more accurate to say that Tamura watched in Visible Thought, as Kirigiri's expressions were almost impossible to read when he wasn't explicitly emoting. Tamura grunted while carefully considering what he had seen. I expected a less even matchup, but I guess he put more into his charisma stat than attack for this round. Wonder why? Isn't it obvious, Tamura? Came the baritone from the monitor. He's crafting an acceptable persona for the masses. It's one thing to have power in this society infested with heroes, but combining it with a false perception of kindness and benevolence makes him an even more palatable paragon, no doubt at the direction of All Might to groom his young successor. But didn't he say that he didn't want to succeed All Might? Tamura questioned. A clear misdirection, All for one waved off. Publicly declaring the successor to the symbol of peace immediately creates a massive target and monumental expectations. Merely desiring to be a beacon for the disenfranchised does much less in that regard, sounding more like wishful thinking from a naive child than anything else. It's the perfect cover, especially with his lineage being a proverbial smoking gun. What's so special about his lineage, anyway? There's no need to concern yourself with that for right now, Tamura Shigaraki, he assured, much to the young adult's growing annoyance. Just keep focused on destroying the symbol of peace and his successor. Right, the symbol of peace, Tamura lowly muttered. His brain was on anything but All Might, though. The way his sensei dismissed his thoughts and nudged him toward a preferred path really annoyed him. It just didn't make sense to him that All Might could take on and defeat the Namu so expediently, but his supposed successor was practically torn apart by the creature. Their powers just didn't feel similar enough for Tamura to think there was any connection, but Sensei knew best. Sensei always knew best. Izuku watched the admittedly entertaining arm wrestling match that decided the tiebreaker between Kirishima and Tetsutetsu on a TV in the hallway. Izuku heard a soft set of footsteps behind him, and he turned to see a very puffy-eyed Ochako approaching him. "Whoa, are you okay? Was it the match? Did something else happen?" He rapidly fired in concern, but she quickly waved it away. No, everything's fine," she assured. "I just had a talk with my dad is all." Izuku nodded, and the two made their way back to a seating area in a comfortable silence, at least on Izuku's end. Ochako, however, had something on her mind. "Were you holding back against me, Izuku?" she suddenly prompted. Izuku was silent for a moment, even though he was somewhat expecting the question. "No, I wasn't holding back. Why do you ask?" Ochako wasn't really satisfied with that response. "It's just, I watched you fight that bird creature at the Astia and take down the zero-pointer at the entrance exam. I know that you could have probably broken my back over your knee like Bane did to Batman without even breaking a sweat, so why didn't you?" Izuku was very much taken aback with the morbidness of the example in regards to the question, but he was even more taken aback by the reference itself. "That's a pretty deep cut. I didn't think you were into pre-quirk American comics." "My dad's a collector, and I read a good bit of his collection," she answered. "Don't dodge the question." "You're right, I probably could have done that if I were really dead set on doing so," he responded and met her gaze. "I doubt that I would have been able to without you almost certainly negating my gravity, though." "And?" she rebutted. "And I think you're underrating just how cracked your ability to tip the scales of a fight with a single touch truly is," he began to explain. I know that you understand very well that it's an almost guaranteed win condition since you centered your strategy around that. What you may not be considering is that I had to rethink my usual battle strategy to account for not letting you land a hit on me while also not being able to bounce around like normal, and that was much easier said than done. Not only did you keep me on my toes, but you truly made me get creative to keep you at bay. Kirishima is the winner. Add him to the bracket, they heard Midnight announce to the crowd. I didn't think I'd ever end up using my red flames in a fight with anyone other than maybe Todoroki, but here we are. And do keep in mind that I literally cannot fly without your help. Give yourself the credit you deserve. You were pretty damn awesome out there. He finished with a smile, and she valiantly tried to hide the re-emerging tears that were prickling her eyes. All right, folks, it's time to get the second round going. You also broke my nose, so there's that, he added with a chuckle and a tap of his nose with a finger wreathed in pink. Right, she sheepishly remarked. Sorry about that. Don't sweat it, he waved off. I'll return the favor at some point. Right, she nodded with a smile before she paused, and what he said caught up with her. Wait, what? Ready? The determined scowl of Bakugo met the equally hardened scowl of Kamakiri. Both boys were ready to move at a moment's notice. The blonde's arms were spread and his palms were sparking, and the mohawked manty's arms were crossed in front of him with the tips of blades poking out of his skin. Begin. The two charged each other, and Kamakiri proved to be the faster one with a swipe at Bakugo's face with his fully engaged blades. Bakugo dodged the swipe just barely enough to get nicked on the cheek before letting off a powerful explosion to Kamakiri's side. But the boy's speed proved troublesome again when he shifted his body and created a number of blades to shield himself from the blast. Guess Bug Boy's pretty quick on his feet, Bakugo snarked with a smirk. Quick enough to cut you to pieces, Kamakiri replied and lunged again. Bring it! Bakugo snapped back and dodged the incoming series of swipes from the mantis headed boy. Bakugo sidestepped a swipe from Kamakiri's left arm and snatched it in an iron grip. Then he whipped out his free arm and set off several small explosions to give himself the extra momentum to spin the other boy around and slam him to the ring. He finished the combo by leveling a much larger explosion right at the down boy to end the bout quickly and decisively. The problem was that it did not end the bout, much to Bakugo's annoyance. Kamakiri, a little worse for wear, sprung to his feet and readied for another go at the blonde. You're not putting me down that easily, explosion boy, Kamakiri shouted with a new set of blades ready for action. Good, Bakugo replied with a wicked grin. In the one-a section, Izuku and Todoroki carefully watched the vicious exchange of slashes and explosions between the two ferocious combatants. There wasn't a guarantee that one of them would make it to the final round, but it was wise to evaluate the competition anyway, especially when both Bakugo and Kamakiri seemed to have quite a bit to prove. It's kind of interesting seeing Bakugo fight since he hasn't been in heroics classes with us after the first one, Tsu commented after the blonde ducked another swipe and answered with an explosion to the ribs. Doesn't really look like he needed them, to be honest, Kaminari added. Has he always been this intense? He's been a lot more subdued than normal, actually, Izuku replied as Kamakiri responded with a stiff backhand to the blonde. This fight is more of the Bakugo I remember. You two knew each other? Sato asked. Yes, he answered without going into the same level of detail he did for Ochako and Ida weeks prior. Our moms have been best friends since they were our age. We spent a lot of our younger years together. Todoroki's brow furrowed when he heard that, as it meant that his mother may have been friends with not only Midoriya's mom but Bakugo's as well. If that was the case, the facts that the three of them were roughly the same age, attended the same hero school, and were placed in the same class in said hero program were entirely too convenient. He'd pin that to the board and investigate it further when he got home. And he still tried to blow you up? Tsu dryly asked while Bakugo launched himself over Kamakiri and unleashed a large explosion when the boy was directly under him. I never said he wasn't an asshole, Izuku replied with a shrug, and he peered down at the ring to see Kamakiri unsteadily step out of the smoke with more blades at the ready despite his labored breathing. He seems to be getting better about that, though. In the ring, Bakugo stood poised to unleash another round at his opponent. He would be lying if he said he wasn't enjoying himself. He lost count of the amount of cuts and slashes he had peppering his body from the battle. It was the first time in over 2 weeks that he had a proper fight with someone, and it was even better that it was against someone strong and capable enough to give him a good one. Kamakiri was feeling much of the same. He was being tested unlike he had ever been before, and it was exhilarating. Even on wobbly legs and coughing out the ashen taste of smoke from the explosions that had been bombarding him the entire fight, he was ready for more. I can do this all day, he said with a smirk and resumed a stance. He may not have gotten the chance to beat the purple kid's ass for using him as a puppet, but this fight more than made up for it. Your funeral, Bakugo nodded, and the two readied for what felt to everyone watching like the final stand. The two teens charged once more, and Kamakiri thrust with his blades while Bakugo aimed an explosion at the ground between them. Kamakiri's blades hit nothing but air when Bakugo propelled himself up and over the teen once again, this time landing behind him and aiming a much larger explosion at the boy's unguarded back. The force blasted Kamakiri away, sending him tumbling a considerable distance across the ring until he skidded to a stop near the edge. The boy tried to get back to his feet, but he fell back to the ground with a thud. Kamakiri is unable to continue. Bakugo advances to the semifinals, Midnight announced, and the crowd raved in approval. Bakugo's grin grew even more at the announcement of his victory, and he shot pointed looks at both Izuku and Todoroki. The message was clear, he was coming for whoever made it to the finals. His grin dropped when he turned back to the downed Kamakiri, and he observed the boy for a moment. He was still conscious, and he was trying his best to get back upright. Bakugo silently walked over to him with his hands in his pockets, and he said nothing to the boy when he reached him. Kamakiri was also silent, and the two stared at each other for a few seconds until Bakugo extended a hand to help the boy up. Kamakiri considered the hand for a moment before inevitably taking it and rising to his feet with the blonde's help. You got lucky, Kamakiri grumbled. The end result won't be the same in our rematch. Any time, bug boy, Bakugo answered with the return of his grin. In the teacher's box, Inko watched on with a smile. She was truly glad to have gotten through to the boy she saw as a nephew before he could self-destruct. She also had to commend him for doing so well despite not having participated in any heroics training beforehand. She was very curious to see how quickly he'd progress once back on a regular training schedule. In the one-a-box, Ida and Todoroki departed to prepare for their match, coming up after the 1B bout between Yui and Shiosaki. It was then that Izuku noticed that someone was missing. Yayarazu isn't here. I wonder if she took that loss really hard. The next few matches went by rather quickly. Yui and Shiosaki met in the ring, and Yui immediately placed her hand in her pocket as expected, while Shiosaki readied her vines for a quick extraction. He could hear people be a little skeptical of her attempting the same bluff a second time. However, Izuku noticed that it was the opposite hand as the previous match, so he wasn't so sure it was a bluff rather than a deliberate move. Sure enough, the battle began and Yui threw a handful of sand at Shiosaki that enlarged into a practical meteor shower. Her vines were faster, though, and a thick wall sprouted around her, while several others snaked through the ring and snagged Yui's arms before she could shrink it again. Once the danger of the sand was neutralized, the vines coiled around the rest of her body and carried her out of the ring before dropping her out of bounds. Kodai is out of bounds. Shiosaki advances to the semifinals, Midnight announced. Izuku let out a sigh of relief that he wouldn't have to end up facing Yui in the finals, and he turned to see Kirishima leaving the stands. He supposed it was time to get ready, and after a few wishes of luck from his friends, he set off through the halls towards the waiting area. Along the way, he wandered past a TV that was showing Ida running around the ring in evasion of massive trails of ice. However, a sniffle from an alcove near a set of stairs gained his attention. When he went to investigate, he heard quiet mutterings of, "Maybe they're right," and "never strong enough, never smart enough, never pretty enough." Turning the corner, he found Yaoyorozu in a corner with her head partially buried in her knees. "Yaoyorozu, are you okay?" Izuku softly asked, and she gasped at his appearance. "Midoriya," she yelped in surprise. "I didn't hear you coming." "Few ever do," he responded in jest. "What's wrong?" It's nothing," she weakly denied. "I'm just a little disappointed is all." Izuku sat down cross-legged in front of her. "It seems like it's a little more than that." She shook her head and wiped the remaining tears away. "I'll be fine, I promise. If I'm not mistaken, your match is next. You should get going." Izuku reluctantly acquiesced and stood. "I suppose so. Just remember that myself and all of our classmates are here for you if you ever need anything at all. We always will be." "I will," she nodded with a small, thankful smile. "Good luck." Izuku nodded and turned to head to the waiting room, but he stopped in his tracks before he could get very far. "By the way," he said over his shoulder, "whoever is insisting that you aren't strong, smart, or pretty enough is a goddamn liar, and I will put them through a wall." She couldn't fight the snort that left her at his declaration, and she watched him walk down the hall with a sad smile. The smile dropped, and only a bitter sadness remained. "I really wish it was that simple," she whispered. Izuku faced down the sharp-toothed grin of Kirishima in the center of the ring. He was excited for the match since fighting Kirishima would naturally be simpler than the rest. It wouldn't necessarily be easier, but the problem in front of him was one that could literally be solved by punching it harder, and that was always nice. "Ready?" "I've been wanting to test for myself how strong you really are since the first day, Midoriya. You're going down. Begin." Izuku went up in a blaze of green while Kirishima hardened his entire upper body, and the two met fists with a loud bang. Kirishima threw a left hook that Izuku ducked and answered with a hard punch to the hardened redhead's kidney, but Kirishima was mostly unaffected. "You're gonna have to do a lot better than that," Kirishima taunted. "Careful what you wish for," Izuku retorted. The following exchange made a few things clear to the audience. The first was that Kirishima could absorb an absurd amount of punishment and keep on ticking, as the punches that Izuku was leveling on him with arms that burned an even deeper emerald than when the match started could be heard and even felt by those on security detail outside of the stadium. The second thing was that Kirishima could deal just as much damage as he could take. Every once in a while, Kirishima would land a punch to Izuku that dazed him, or even almost knocked him off his feet at points, and those punches could be heard throughout the stadium as well. The final thing, though, was the most important, and it was the blatant gulf in skill between the two combatants. Kirishima could certainly do some real damage with his punches when they landed, but that was exactly the problem. They had to land, and very few of them actually did. The fight was primarily a showcase of Izuku dodging and deflecting strikes before answering back with bone-shaking hits of his own, rather than a back-and-forth smash fest between the two. With that said, though, Izuku was still only slowly chipping away at the boy's rough exterior. The longer the battle went on, the more he could feel the strain begin to set in on his muscles, but he pushed through regardless. He was certain that if he was feeling it, Kirishima had to be feeling exhaustion of his own, and a tired Kirishima would certainly struggle with keeping up his hardening with anywhere close to the same efficacy. This has been a real battle of attrition, sports fans. Midoriya has been bobbing and weaving for the majority of the fight, but now he's unloading a heavy barrage of body shots to Kirishima in hopes of getting through that impenetrable armor. Will he succeed? The audience was on their heels in wonder of the same question, and it was answered when sharp, flesh-colored chips started flying off of Kirishima like broken glass, tearing up Izuku's gym uniform and cutting where his skin was exposed. He did not let up, though. and he poured even more strength into his barrage to further the progress. The roar of the crowd at the sight only fueled him further, and his right arm burned brightly with green fire before he slammed a final punch into Kirishima's abdomen, practically blasting him away towards the edge of the ring. Kirishima wasn't down just yet, though, and he slowly tried to rise from the ground. Izuku wouldn't give him the chance, and he darted toward the downed boy to unleash his finishing maneuver. It was something he had been toying around with in training and wanted to try in an actual battle. When he was close enough to Kirishima, he poured the flame into his legs and jumped into the air, doing a front flip before coming down with his brightly burning heel. Lunar Inferno. The fiery heel came down on Kirishima with a loud crash, and the boy was finally down for the count. There was also a brand new crater in the ring at the point of impact, but that could be fixed. Sitting on her couch in the living room of her apartment, a tan woman with long, rabbit ears poking out of her white hair watched her TV screen with a twitching eye. That little shit is so dead if I ever see him. Actually, do I have anything to do next week? She flipped through her schedule to see if she had any prior obligations or plans to patrol somewhere else in the country, and she unleashed a feral grin when she saw that there were none. Izuku shivered in place for a brief moment. He didn't know why, but he felt like there was a lot of pain coming his way in the near future. Kirishima has been knocked out. Midoriya is the winner. And Midoriya completes our final four, ladies and gentlemen. Bakugo, Shiosaki, Todoroki, and Midoriya are the last few standing. Izuku left the field and was heading through the halls back to the waiting room when he spotted Bakugo entering the hall from the other end. The two locked eyes and stared at each other as they passed. Bakugo appeared content with saying nothing, but Izuku had experienced too many silent stare-offs that day for his tastes. "Bakugo," he began when the two were in front of each other, "good luck out there. I hope to see you in the finals." The blonde's eyes widened in surprise. He wasn't really sure what he was expecting from the greenhead after, well, everything he had attempted to put the boy through in their lives, but it certainly wasn't cordial encouragement. He grunted and continued past him without looking back, and he spoke. "I'm gonna beat you and win this damn festival, and I will be the number one. You can count on that." Izuku watched his former friend leave in the direction of the ring, and then he continued on his way back to the waiting room. The first match of the semifinals. We're about to see a battle for hero class supremacy. Again with the screaming. First up, from Class 1A, Katsuki Bakugo versus, from Class 1B, Ibara Shiosaki. Bakugo's scowl was in full force and his palms crackled in anticipation. Shiosaki's vines readied themselves to strike. Start. Bakugo blasted himself into the air to avoid the mess of vines that lunged for him as soon as the match began. He aimed down at her and sent a large explosion to the girl, but she blocked the blast as best as she could with a wall of her hair. She was a little disturbed to see that the vines were burned and unusable. However, Bakugo saw this and grinned. He knew exactly what he needed to do. Blasting away the many vines that came to ensnare him on his way back down, he fought his way through the jungle with explosion after explosion on his way to Shiosaki's position. The girl wouldn't stand down, though, and she waited for Bakugo to burn his way a little further before a collection of vines emerged from under the ring and coiled around him. "Bakugo's trapped. Is this the end for him?" "FCK that," the blonde shouted, and the vines around his arms started glowing before a massive explosion erupted and freed him from the trap. Shiosaki was rattled by the ease in which he dismantled her trap and the frightening grin he sported along the way. "No more screwing around," he growled and propelled himself over the newer vines that made to attack him. Then he pointed his right palm at her and grabbed his wrist for support. Howitzer impact. The resulting explosion wasted whatever vines were remaining to snag him, as well as all of those that were acting as cover for her. The blast sent her flying out of the ring and skidding onto the grass well out of bounds. Shiosaki is out of bounds. Bakugo advances to the final match. and the first half of the final two has been decided. In the waiting room, Izuku stood up from his seat. I guess Bakugo's making good on that promise. Now it's my turn. I can feel the anticipation in the stadium, and that's because the second match of the semifinals is gonna be epic. Izuku appeared on the field from the tunnel while Todoroki did the same from the other side, and the crowd exploded. It's the guy who won his first fight by a landslide and literally left half the audience frozen. He's been nigh unstoppable the entire day. It's the hero course's Shoto Todoroki. And this other kid has been a force of nature alongside him. Despite some people's best efforts, his will shan't be denied. Also from the hero course, Izuku Midoriya. When the two met in the middle of the ring, the tension among them was absolutely palpable. Midnight and Cementos could feel it. Both classes 1A and 1B could feel it, and even the pro heroes in attendance could feel it. So, here we are, Todoroki said. I said I'd beat you, and I will honor that. I've said this way too often today, but you're more than welcome to try, Izuku responded. You're not winning today, though. It's an unstoppable force versus an immovable object. Which will prevail? Takoyami, how do you think this match will go? Ida asked in his seat next to Ochako. It depends on if Midoriya is able to get close to him, he answered. While he had been able to melt through Todoroki's ice before, we don't know if he can do so with the sheer quantity of ice that Todoroki has unleashed today. It should be an interesting matchup. If not, he could just avoid the ice entirely and force Todoroki into an up-close encounter, Ochako supplied. But both her and the bird head beside her were taken by surprise when Ida started vibrating. Oh, please excuse me, my mother is calling. Ida excused himself and left his seat to take the call. In another area of the arena, Endeavor surveyed the ring with a keen eye. This was exactly the challenge Shoto needed to set him straight, and it was the perfect opportunity to scout the next potential to his son. Both of the heroes in training have been frontrunners in the festival, but which one of these rivals will advance to the final round? Prepare for Midoriya vs. Todoroki. The two boys fell into a stance, Todoroki planting his right foot forward to prepare an ice attack, while Izuku spread his legs and leaned his body to the right in preparation to dash out of the way. Begin. Now, both boys thought simultaneously as a wall of ice slammed into the spot where the now bright yellow Izuku was previously standing. Todoroki was prepared, though, and immediately slammed his right hand down to the ring in the direction of Izuku's landing spot. Foregoing yellow for green, Izuku leveled a very hard punch to the incoming ice and shattered the entire structure, sending a wave of ice shards and frigid wind back toward the two-tone teen and the audience behind him. Todoroki was only saved by a wall of ice behind him. Holy cow! Midoriya literally punched through Todoroki's opening move. Todoroki sent another, even larger wave of ice at Izuku, but Izuku smashed through that one with his left arm. He countered again. You want to do this from range? Izuku commented before darting towards his opponent. I don't think so. Todoroki slammed his hand to the ground and created a bridge of ice that he slid on to meet Izuku's charge. Izuku leaped to face him and threw a left hook shrouded in a red-hot glow to carve through Todoroki's attempt to freeze him up close, and his red-hot fist slammed into the boy's cheek and sent him back down the ice slide. Izuku chased after him, slicing through the ice as he slid with his glowing left hand until he was right on top of the heterochromatic boy, and then, with crimson fire pouring off of his hand, he slammed his palm into Todoroki's chest to press him against the boy's own protective barrier and unleashed the full might of his red flames in a single blast. Midoriya is really turning up the heat against Todoroki. He's taking the fight directly to him and negating his ice all the while. Smart. Is he really overpowering Todoroki right now? Mina incredulously asked among her classmates. Hell yeah, he is, Toru cheered. Kick his ass, Midori. His quirk certainly seems tailor-made to counter Todoroki's ice, Yaoyorozu added. Oh, yeah, Momo, when did you get here? Mina asked in surprise. A little bit after Midoriya's match with Kirishima, she answered vaguely. I caught it in the hallway. That guy really hits hard, Kirishima supplied with a rub to his still tender ribs. I knew this match would be intense, but they're killing it down there. Bakugo said nothing as he watched the match very intently. Back in the ring, Todoroki was feeling the effects of being slammed into his barrier as well as practically being broiled in an interstellar oven. He opened his eyes when he was certain that the blinding red light had died down, and he saw no sign of his opponent anywhere. He couldn't burrow through the ground, so the only option was up above. Lo and behold, Izuku was barreling down toward him with his green fire back in use, primed to smash Todoroki into the ground. Todoroki fought through the invasive warmth his body still felt to create a veritable fortress of ice around him to momentarily delay the attack. Izuku was undeterred, and he slammed his fist into the ice, but it didn't immediately break. Izuku punched it again and again until it finally gave and he shattered through. Unfortunately, Todoroki was no longer there. I've got you now, Izuku heard the boy say from the other side of an ice wall, and Todoroki spawned another massive glacier that completely encompassed the area Izuku was standing in but didn't quite reach the audience this time. And just like that, the tables have turned again. Todoroki led Midoriya into a trap with that fortress and then froze him solid when he smashed his way through. He packed so much ice into that cover specifically so Midoriya wouldn't be able to immediately burst through it, giving him more time to ready his trap. You think we can call this one right now? All talking ceased when the ice that was trapping Izuku began to crack and glow a bright red, and it promptly exploded in a brilliant crimson flame that towered over the ring and almost reached the open air above the stadium. Standing in the impetus of the flame was Izuku, his gym uniform slowly burning away as he stood, and he cut the flame before more of it had any chance to. Upon close inspection, Todoroki could see that he was sweating, so he surmised that not even the green head was immune to the heat of his red flames at a point. Todoroki wasn't in a much better state himself. The blast of heat from Izuku made it exponentially more difficult to use his ice effectively, let alone drag out as much ice as he had for the diversion and the ice prison. He was quickly becoming exhausted, even if the warmth from the red fire kept him from suffering from frostbite like he normally would after overusing his ice. Amazing, folks. Midoriya has freed himself from an icy prison and looks ready to go. Back in the stands, 1A and 1B were collectively agape, Zero most of all. Their class rep was hit with a slightly smaller version of what he was hit with, and he just flash melted himself out of it like a blowtorch, barely looking any worse for wear. Over with 1B, Monoma was fighting very hard to not throw his arms up and storm out of the arena. Who the hell gave one the right to be that busted? If he listened closely, he would be able to hear Shinso's teeth grinding from the general studies section. Was Midoriya always this cool? Takage asked Yui beside her. I believe the more fitting term is hot, she answered. Is that a lame pun about the red fire, or are you referring to the fact that his uniform is half burned away? Yes. Back in the ring, Izuku slowly approached Todoroki, who was bent over and taking labored breaths. You look like shit, he lightly commented. So do you, Todoroki replied. Fair enough, he shrugged. You're not gonna beat me like that, you know. Todoroki was silent. He regained a bit of his energy, and he looked up to the audience at Endeavor. He sighed. I suppose you're right. Don't look at him, look at me, Izuku commanded while stepping forward toward him. You're not doing it for him. You're not doing anything for him. You are Shoto. You can be the kind of hero you want to be when you grow up. Izuku's right arm went up in kaleidoscopic fire, and he stomped in front of Todoroki. So, be Shoto, damn it, he shouted before decking him on the left side of his face, sending him sprawling to the ground. It's okay to use your powers to be who you want to be. That's right. I am Shoto, and I will be a hero. Todoroki stood up, going up in an inferno of his own. Is that? Holy shit, he's using his fire, Minta screamed. This just got way more interesting, Kaminari agreed. Inko and All Might watched on in slight concern. Todoroki, using his left side, added a new dimension to the fight entirely, and they were curious to see how Izuku would combat it. Maybe it isn't such a great idea to help your opponent through mental blocks, but thank you nonetheless, Todoroki spoke. I need to keep reminding myself of who I am. It wouldn't be right to beat you while you weren't at full capacity, Izuku responded with a smirk. You still think you can beat me? Todoroki challenged with his own smirk, ice beginning to creep up his right side while fire cascaded over his left. Izuku's entire form went up in the colorful fire, and he settled back into a stance. Prove that I can't. Todoroki stopped, and a gargantuan wave of ice shot toward Izuku. Izuku leaped into the air and smashed through the first part of the wave with a spin kick, blanketing his legs with green fire when he landed in the ice that carried him towards the other side of the ring. Todoroki watched the now yellow blur bounce from pillar to pillar toward him, and the yellow transitioned back to the painfully familiar rainbow. He then unleashed the heat from his left hand and blasted it forward in tandem with another shot of his ice to meet the charge. Izuku pushed his quirk as far as he could, trying to access individual pieces of his quirk and meld them together for a grossly dangerous super move. He was genuinely surprised when he felt his fire kick into a second gear, so to speak, and his kaleidoscopic fire flared up to an intensity that he hadn't discovered before. He knew he would regret the aftermath, but he was ready to meet Todoroki's attack head-on. That's at midnight. One of them could be killed, Cementos shouted while filling the ring with as much cement as he could to block the incoming collision, and Midnight tore a section of her costume off to unleash a plume of her somnambulist gas to knock them out. Neither effort was very effective, as even the several walls that Cementos erected in the ring between them were torn through like wet paper towels by both attacks. The resulting collision caused an explosion of concrete, ice, and the most vibrant colors that anyone in the stadium had ever seen. They were swamped with so much color that it felt to many like they were trapped within a prism hurtling towards the sun. When the color died down, Midnight and Cementos peeked over the bunker that he quickly erected for them when it became clear that the two teachers weren't going to be able to stop the wanton destruction that the teens were dead set on causing. Having great power doesn't mean you'll be a good hero, but I'm really glad these two chose to be heroes rather than villains, Cementos commented in shock, and Midnight dumbly nodded. What happened just now? What the heck is up with those students, Eraser? The air around the ring had been thoroughly cooled down, and then it rapidly expanded when it heated up. Wait, that's what caused the explosion. How hot did that fire even get? I can't see a thing down there. Is the match even still going on or what? When the smoke finally cleared, the ring was absolutely annihilated. Midnight looked to the epicenter of the explosion, and no one was there. Fearing the worst, she frantically looked around the arena until her eyes landed on the tattered, beaten form of Midoriya lying unconscious against the wall of the arena. She looked directly to the other side and saw Todoroki planted in the wall in a human-shaped crater, but he eventually slid out of the crater and face planted to the ground. They're both out of bounds and unconscious, Midnight stammered. It's a draw. The crowd was dead silent. No one knew what to say or how to react. They watched two powerhouse teenagers throw everything they had as well as the kitchen sink at each other, resulting in the closest thing to a cataclysmic explosion that anyone hoped they would ever live to see. And it ended in a draw. No conclusive winner, no one definitely moving on to the finals, and likely no tiebreaker if the state both teams were in was any indication. It was a draw. Are you kidding me? Was the apoplectic shout of Bakugo at the announcement. That sufficiently broke the crowd from their stupor, and they erupted into a raucous uproar. There's absolutely no way that these boys will be well enough to compete after that, even with recovery girls healing, Cementos commented. As much as I hate it, I agree, Midnight lamented. Bakugo might just win the whole thing by default. It's a shame, both of these boys fought way too hard to go down like this. The sentiment was shared among 1A, as even though there wasn't an official declaration made, the writing was on the wall for how the festival would conclude. Do you think they could try to force a tiebreaker? Mineta grasped at straws. I highly doubt it, Shoji sighed. Those guys won't be walking for a while, let alone fighting. Bakugo pointedly ignored everything while he waited for any official updates on how they'd proceed. He absolutely refused to accept a win by default, and he wouldn't hear a word of it. Inko was a mixture of worry and motherly fury. She wanted so badly to scoop her son off the ground and hug him tightly until Recovery Girl healed him enough for her to beat him back into a hospital bed for being so reckless again. All Might could swear that he saw a translucent yellow glove reach out of him before it was yanked back inside by several other hands, accompanied by the angry voice of his sensei screaming that she'd throttle the little shit for making her worry so badly. Well, folks, it doesn't look like Midoriya or Todoroki will be in any condition to hold a tiebreaker or compete in the finals afterward. So the first-year champion of the UA Sports Festival is Katsuki Bakugo from Class 1A. Got him, Nit, he raged while the crowd cheered. I will not accept a win like this. Should we do something about this? Gyro asked to anyone who was listening. What's there to do without the risk of being blown up? Ribbit? Tsu questioned in reply. Hey, Yamomo? Toru whispered to Yaoyorozu. Can you make a lead pipe? But may I ask why? She hesitantly probed after creating the requested item and handing it to the invisible girl. You'll see, was all she said before soundlessly moving toward the furious blonde. Yaoyorozu's question was answered when a loud clang and the solid thump of a body hitting the floor was heard. Well, that's an option, I guess, Tsu remarked. The first-year students have completed all of the events for the UA Sports Festival. Now it's time to relax and enjoy the award ceremony, Midnight called out, and a shower of confetti rained down on the students as fireworks boomed overhead. In front of the waiting students, a podium rose from the ground, and the final 4 competitors stood proudly on their respective podiums. Well, Shiosaki stood proudly on her third-place podium, anyway. Todoroki stood on another third-place podium since there technically wasn't a second place to give covered in bandages with a look that told all in attendance that moving an inch was excruciating. Izuku was next to him on the same podium covered in even more bandages and strapped to a hand truck to keep him upright, and he was clearly on another planet entirely, presumably to numb the pain while he was conscious. Finally, festering on the first-place podium in the center was Bakugo with a comically large knot on his head, and from his furious snarl and the way he was trying very hard to keep his arms to his side, it was clear to all that he was not standing there on his own volition. FCK up again, and you'll be lucky to land in general studies. Fuck up nearly as badly as you did today, and there won't be a body to send to Ketsubutsu. Those words from his pseudo-aunt were the only things keeping him still and his mouth shut. Going ballistic in front of the world in the award ceremony of the UA Sports Festival most likely landed in the very bad F-up category. Too bad Ida had to leave and couldn't be here for this, Tsu lamented. I don't think Midoriya is here with us either, Kaminari joked. Wherever he is, he looks like he's enjoying it. He's wherever you go whenever you short your brain out, Gyro sniped with a smirk that grew even more when Kaminari deflated. Now, let's break out the hardware, Midnight continued. Of course, there's only one person worthy of distributing the awards. Ha 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 ha, citizens, I am here with the medals, boomed the No. One hero as he leaped into the stadium from the roof and landed in front of the students, and the crowd erupted for the umpteenth time that day. Young Shiosaki, congratulations, All Might told the girl while placing the bronze medal around her neck. You showed tremendous ability out there. Thank you very much, All Might. Your praise fills me with more elation than I can describe, she kindly replied with a smile. However, you have more training to do if you want to face different kinds of villains, All Might continued while giving the girl a quick hug. You won't be able to simply restrain every opponent you face. She gratefully nodded, and the man moved on to the injured duo on the other side. Young Todoroki, young Midoriya, congratulations, he said to the boys while bearing 2 more bronze medals. I'm glad that you used your left side and embraced it as a part of yourself and no one else. You'll make a fine hero. Pain, was Todoroki's simple reply once All Might placed the medal around his neck. And you, young Midoriya, you were truly outstanding, he said while placing the final bronze medal around the cast on Izuku's neck. I have no doubts that you'll become a symbol even greater than myself. That got the attention of everyone listening, whether they be in the field or in the audience. The kid who declared his desire to be a symbol for the downtrodden just got a glowing endorsement from the symbol of peace himself. Talk about massive expectations to live up to. If the boy was even halfway cognizant of where he even was, he probably would have pissed himself on the spot. And now, young Bakugo, All Might boomed to the boy who was struggling mightily to keep it together. One look towards Inko, who was motioning across her throat with her thumb, was enough to keep him contained. You may not have won the tournament in the manner you wanted, but you still proved your strength, force of will, and tenacity to get as far as you did. All Might held the first-place medal in front of him. Please accept this first-place medal, even if you have to think of it as a scar, something you'll never forget. Bakugo's eye violently twitched when the medal was placed around his neck, and Izuku's dumb giggling to the right of him wasn't helping. Neither was the hug All Might gave him. Here they are, the winners of this year's sports festival. All Might showcased the 4 students. But listen closely, any of you first years could have ended up standing on these podiums. Think about what you've done today. You've challenged each other, learned, and climbed even closer to your goals of being pros. I think the next generation of heroes is proving to be our most promising one yet. So, I have one more thing to say, he bellowed while throwing his hand to the sky. I want everyone to yell it with me. You know what it is. Plus, ultra thanks everyone for your hard work, were the different chants of the audience and All Might. The resulting scolding All Might received from the students and audience caused such a ruckus that Izuku's hand truck started rolling backwards, and he fell off the podium with a goofy thud. Tamura and Kirishima watched on in silence after the camera picked up Izuku's unfortunate tumble. Only a few more seconds passed before Tamura began to snicker. That snicker became a strangled chuckle. That chuckle developed into uncontrollable laughter. He didn't notice the door of the bar opening or Kirishima practically teleporting back to his place behind the bar to clean glasses that he had already cleaned 7 times over until someone called out to him. Yo, Tamura, you free for some? Spinner, if you're here to ask me to play League of Legends, I'll dust you right now, Tamura rebuked, and Spinner slowly stepped back outside and closed the door. Tamura sighed and stood up to leave the room until the door opened again, and Spinner poked his head back into the bar. Do I still have an invite to the League of Villains? He sheepishly asked. Yeah, I'll text you the details or whatever. He waved off before his attention snapped back to the Gecko Man. And what the hell are you wearing? Oh, this, Spinner said with clear pride. I'm honoring the philosophy and mission of the hero killer, Stain. That caught Tamura's interest. Hero killer, Stain, huh? Nice work, Aizawa told his class after the festival. You have the next few days of school off to recuperate. I'm sure the pros who watched the festival will want to recruit some of you. We'll look over the draft forms and update you when you return. Get some rest. You still have a lot of training. Yes, sir, the class collectively responded with the exception of Ida, who was absent, Bakugo, who said nothing, Izuku, who giggled, and Todoroki, who only mumbled. All I know is pain. The day after next, Todoroki felt well enough to leave his home and visit the hospital. His mind was a mess on the way there. He was so certain for years that the sight of him would only cause his mother pain, so he never visited. However, he had to accept that they would always be bound to one another. and he would not truly be able to move on as Shoto without getting over this hurdle. After getting her room number from the front desk, he meandered his way up the stairs to the 3rd floor, battling with himself internally the whole way. When he finally made it to the hallway, he spotted a woman leaving one of the rooms. The woman gave him pause as he recognized the green hair. When they locked eyes, recognition came over him, and he remembered her from the USJ. It was verdant Mrs. Midoriya. She smiled when she saw him, and he wasn't entirely sure why until she spoke. "I'm glad to see you're up and about, Todoroki." "Thank you," he responded, not really knowing what to say. "How is Midoriya?" "He's in much better shape than he was a few days ago, but I've still got him on house arrest," she answered with a fond shake of her head. "He told me that you had given him the most fun fight of his life." Todoroki was silent at that, but it wasn't an awkward silence. He couldn't help but feel a touch of warmth inside at the information. He really respected Midoriya. "Mine, too," he muttered. "Who were you here to see?" "Probably the same person you are," she answered with a soft smile. That made sense, as they were best friends. Was it a stretch to think that he and Midoriya were destined to become best friends, too? It was something to think about. He'd see where the strings on his board took him later. He looked at her with a constipated expression when a dark thought flashed through his mind. Do you think she'd even want to see me?" Her smile fell. She stepped forward and placed a tender hand on his right shoulder, her green eyes meeting one gray and one turquoise. "Of course, Todoroki. You're the one person she wants to see the most." Todoroki's resolve hardened, and he nodded. "Thank you." "Of course," she replied, regaining her smile before stepping past him and back down the hall towards the exit. "Mrs. Midoriya," he called out before she could get too far, and she turned to look at him. "At the Aussie, when I stopped that villain from attacking you from behind, I said that we were even. I don't know if you heard that or not, but thank you. Thank you for attempting to be there for my mother and my siblings through the torment." Inko did not immediately respond, instead choosing to find the correct words to answer him with. "No one should ever have to receive thanks for basic human decency. Frankly, I wish I could have done more, and I always will. However, the past can't be changed, and it's better to cherish the moments you have to make the present and future as wonderful as possible." Todoroki nodded, and Inko gave him a final smile. "Now, quit stalling and go let Rei give her baby boy the hug she's been waiting a decade for." With that, she turned around and disappeared down the stairs, leaving Todoroki alone in the hallway once more. He walked toward the door labeled 315, and he sighed. It was now or never. He reached for the door handle, and he pulled it open before stepping inside to see his mother for the first time in a decade. Izuku was drowning. Thick, foul-tasting sludge poured down his throat and into his lungs against his will, and he frantically thrashed about to rid himself of the viscous concoction stealing his life away from him. Suddenly, completely beyond his control, he rapidly heated up and glowed a bright crimson, and he belched red flames that expelled the invasive sludge. Pain, horrified wails were all that filled his ears, and he couldn't tear his eyes away from the sight of a very humanoid man made of sludge, trying desperately to rid himself of the flames to no avail. When the haunting, yellow eyes of the creature met his own, he shot up from his bed dripping in sweat with his heart pounding. When he calmed down, he deeply sighed in a sour mixture of frustration and resignation. He had been having that same nightmare every other night since the USG. No matter how much he kept his brain busy to avoid thinking about it during the day, he couldn't escape the thoughts at night. When he sat back on his bed, the dull aches in his body flared up again. Izuku would readily admit that he had taken a very big risk in his match with Todoroki. He had done exactly what Recovery Girl had explicitly instructed him not to do, and he had been paying for it for approximately 48 hours. He couldn't tell you how many of those hours that he was conscious, but for the moments that he actually was, he felt nothing but untold pain. His body felt like it had been put through a meat grinder, marinated in lemon juice, seasoned with broken glass, and finally taped back together with the juice and glass shards still present. It was still only slightly less unpleasant than the earful he got from Recovery Girl when the grown elephant's quantity of painkillers finally wore off. The bronze medal he didn't remember receiving hung on his wall, and he was initially disappointed about the fact that he didn't at least make it to the finals after declaring that he wasn't going to lose at all. However, after his mother filled him in on what happened, he felt a bit better about the outcome, if not a little worried about how Bakugo took a de facto first-place medal. Since he was under house arrest courtesy of his mother, he had a lot of time to himself while he slowly healed his many injuries in increments. A lot of that time was spent on the internet perusing through articles that were written about the festival, as he expected that a titanic semifinal clash resulting in a double knockout that gave the only remaining competitor the win by default would certainly be newsworthy. He was right, and just about every bit of coverage on the results of the festival explored that in great detail. What he wasn't expecting, however, was to see his name appear in so many related, tangentially related, and even unrelated headlines. Symbol of Peace endorses a new symbol. UA Sports Festival standout Izuku Midoriya makes explosive debut. Izuku Midoriya, beacon in the darkness. What the hell was that about All Might endorsing him? Reading through a few of the articles made things somewhat more clear, as apparently All Might had said that he would be a fine symbol when he awarded him his medal, but it was still absurdly surreal for him. The other headlines he saw didn't help matters, either. Izuku Midoriya, icon for late bloomers everywhere. Quirkless doesn't mean useless, and late bloomer doesn't mean defective. Late bloomer battles son of no, 2-0 to a draw. He didn't really think that last one was fair to Todoroki. Still, he wasn't prepared for the level of coverage he was getting. He supposed that he should have expected it given everything Principal Nizu had told him beforehand, and making a solid first impression was his ultimate goal. But planning for something and the reality of that thing were two very different experiences. Of course, it wasn't all positive. There were a few articles that likened him to fool's gold and called the genuineness of his earlier interview into question. Some called him and the whole festival a UA publicity stunt. A few of the more opinionated pundits and talking heads even said that it was cute that the late bloomer played with the regular kids, but his second-round exit was him falling back down to earth. That one honestly stung him a little bit. It didn't sting as badly as some anonymous people on social media complaining about the half-null stealing the spotlight from the actual winner of the sports festival because he really couldn't dispute that. However, there was one article in particular that grabbed his attention. It was from an independent group called Small Voices, and they, as their name suggested, spoke out and advocated for the quirkless, abused, and otherwise persecuted groups who felt as though their voices went unheard. This even included heteromorphic mutants and those with unstable quirks that sometimes made them a danger to themselves and others, which many late bloomers often ended up having. The article was titled, "Why Izuku Midoriya's Sports Festival Performance is Important," and he was genuinely surprised and touched at the way the author broke down and complimented him so thoroughly. It detailed the encouraging nature of his student pledge, the way he protected others in the obstacle race, and even the aftermath of his match with Ochako. The article also brought up the interview and his desire to help those who had slipped through the cracks, and it commented that while he may not have known the entirety of the quirkless struggle, he still knew enough of it as a late bloomer to want to actively do something about it and reach out to those that were still traversing those treacherous waters. The author noted that it was a fantastic omen for the future that he had the power to make the change he sought, and they concluded that the nation was waiting for the beacon in the darkness to shine a light for those that All Might society had all but abandoned. Beacon in the darkness. That wasn't the only time he saw that phrase used to describe him that day. He didn't quite know how he felt about it, but he didn't dislike the sentiment. Moving away from the news surrounding himself and the sports festival, he stumbled upon another headline that got his attention. Another pro-hero falls to the hero killer. Curious, he read the article, and his blood ran cold when he learned the name of the pro that was attacked. Ingenium, Ida's brother, he breathed out. That was not good. Ida must have been a wreck, especially considering the attack apparently happened during the sports festival itself. Fortunately, he was only critically wounded rather than fatally wounded, but the outlook still great for him. He sighed, and he considered texting Ida to check up on him, but he decided against it. Ida hadn't told him himself, so he figured that the boy wouldn't really appreciate him finding out through the news and potentially forcing a subject that he didn't really want to discuss. He resolved to let his friend know in person that he was there to support him if ever needed. Later that evening, Izuku was heading into the living room while Inko was preparing to make dinner for the both of them, but she ran into a snag. "Damn it, we're out of miso paste," she lamented. "I can run to the store and get some," Izuku offered. "You're still under house arrest, mister," Inko reminded with a frown. "It would be over by tomorrow morning, anyway," he argued. "Besides, it's not like I'll find any trouble and re-hospitalize myself on a quick market run. I'll be in and out, back in a flash." Inko narrowed her eyes at him, but she soon sighed and relented. "Fine. Despite my better judgment that you've jinxed yourself, go on out. Even though I know you can take care of yourself, please call or text if you do run into trouble. I know how stupidly stringent quirk use laws can be without a provisional license." "Will do," he assured before heading out. "I'll be right back." Izuku set off from his apartment and down the street to the nearest store. He had his earbuds in and his hands in his pockets, and to the world, he looked like any regular teenager meandering down the street without really paying attention to his surroundings. The truth, though, was that Izuku was very aware of his surroundings. He was so aware, in fact, that he knew that about halfway to the store, he was being followed. Izuku did not let on the fact that he knew he had a tail, and he proceeded on like normal to the store. Once inside, he got the miso paste and a few cups of instant ramen, and he left back in the direction he came. He didn't head home, though, as he made a few extra turns onto emptier side streets to see if his tail would follow him. Sure enough, they did. Izuku casually strolled into an alleyway off of one of those emptier residential streets, and he stopped in the center and waited for the arrival of his tail. He would not have to wait long before a shuffle brought his attention to a figure slinking past a few trash bags to the right of him, and he was face to face with a pair of golden, slitted eyes. "It is you. I knew it." The new arrival cheered when she saw Izuku up close. Upon closer examination, the girl was around his age with a beige cardigan over a traditional schoolgirl outfit, and her eyes were slightly tilted with a face and mouth that somewhat resembled that of a cat. Her blonde hair was put up in two messy buns, and she sported a fanged grin with a blush that completed the unsettling image. He was already on edge when he felt he was being followed, but the knife in her hand told him all he needed to know. He definitely jinxed himself again. "You know me?" he hesitantly ventured. "MHM," she excitedly confirmed. "I saw you on TV in the sports festival. You were so bloody, and it was so beautiful." "Right," Izuku responded with the only thing that would come to mind. "Why are you following me?" "Because you looked so good covered in blood, and you should look like that all the time," she happily answered, and then her smile dropped for a moment. "And I remember you from that interview that was everywhere. You said you wanted to help those that slipped through the cracks." And, like a light switch, the momentary lucidity was gone, and the unsettling, almost euphoric smile returned. However, it wasn't just euphoric, it was hungry as well. "And that makes me want to cut you up and share my love with you," she declared with a swing of her knife that he ducked and backed away from. "I want to cut you and drink your blood so that I can be you and love you forever." Izuku did not get a word out before another knife materialized in her free hand, and she lunged for him with frightening speed. Just barely dodging by the skin of his teeth, he tossed aside the bag of groceries and dodged the knife she threw at him before igniting in a bright, yellow flame. "Pretty," she commented before Izuku dashed behind her and attempted to knock her out with a strike to the back of her neck. But he was flabbergasted when his hand hit nothing, and he was swept to the floor. Toga stood over him with her knife poised to penetrate him, and his yellow flame flickered to orange and projected into a small wall in front of him right as she brought the knife down. When she hit nothing but a solid wall of flat, orange fire, her confusion allowed Izuku to take advantage and kick the wall into her to create separation. With that separation, Izuku now had a few moments to think. The girl had proven to be fast, scarily fast. In fact, she was somehow faster than he was with his yellow flames. Or did she just have faster reflexes? That still wouldn't make sense unless her brain could process information faster than he could move, which he supposed was possible but not very likely. Was it some sort of precognition? In any other situation, she would have been so cool to analyze. "Why are you staring at me like that?" she asked, now seemingly more lucid than she just had been. Now Izuku was perplexed, and she seemed to be as well. She appeared to have competing fits of lucidity and murderous euphoria, though one clearly overpowered the other because her blush had just deepened once more and the smile returned. "Just a little bit of your blood, it'll make you look so much prettier," she insisted before lunging at him again. This time, he was ready, and he dropped to the ground to dodge her attack before yanking her out of the air and flipping her onto her back, disarming her in the process. He wasn't done yet, though. He had a plan. While she was struggling, Izuku bit as hard as he could onto the tip of his thumb and drew blood, smeared his other palm with the blood, and placed it over her mouth. The effect was instantaneous, and she stopped struggling and started licking his palm. He had an inkling from some of the things she said that she was very fond of blood, specifically drinking it for whatever reason. Maybe it was quirk-related, and he was taking a massive risk. But the flashes of lucidity she showed where she momentarily seemed like a regular person reminded him of someone going through a really odd, really extreme bout of dissociation, or maybe withdrawals, maybe both. It was a stretch, and she was obviously mentally unwell to begin with. But he had a gut feeling that there was more to this than a mugger trying to kill him for shits and giggles. As for the blood, he certainly wasn't going to cut his thumb with one of her knives because Lord knew where the hell they had been, and he wasn't going to risk sticking an open wound into her mouth either. If she drank strange blood on the regular, he wasn't going to risk catching any blood-borne pathogens from her. After a minute of seemingly content licking from the girl, the ridiculous level of awkwardness of the situation started to catch up with him. He truly did not want to stay in that position, but he really shouldn't just let her go, either. He could call the police, but that realistically wouldn't solve whatever was going on with her, as she'd never get the help she needed by being put into the system. With a sigh, he looked around the alley and saw a stray piece of rope laying beside them, and he did the one thing he wanted to avoid entirely. He called his mother. "Okay, let me get this straight," Inko began as she was rubbing her temples in the alley beside her son and his captive. She really didn't know what to call the tied-up girl now that she wasn't attacking her son. "You noticed about halfway to the store that you were being followed." Izuku nodded. "You kept up the facade that you were unaware and then got what you needed from the store. Then, rather than leading whoever was following you back home, you gave her the runaround until you confronted her in this alley." Izuku nodded. "She recognized you from the sports festival and wanted to cut you up and drink your blood to spread her love, but she also said she recognized you from your interview, and she was much more lucid when she said that." Izuku nodded. "You think that she either has a split personality or is trying to fight off severe withdrawals from a need to consume blood that she has been denied for one reason or another. Potentially some combination of the two." Both Izuku nodded. "Wait, both. Why the hell is there two of you?" she sighed, supremely done with the situation. "Oh, that's my quirk," the tied-up Izuku chirped. "I can transform into anyone whose blood I drink." Inko's head snapped to the original Izuku, and the piercing glare she gave him made him shrink. "You let her drink your blood." It was a statement rather than a question. Izuku hesitantly nodded. Inko let loose a long-suffering sigh and pinched the bridge of her nose. You do understand the potential ramifications of letting someone who could literally impersonate you drink your blood after they had tried to attack you, right? Mom, hear me out, Izuku began, and his mother reluctantly let him speak. She is significantly calmer now that she's had even a small quantity of blood. It leads me to believe that she doesn't get to drink blood very often, or she at least wasn't able to for a very long time if she's going to these lengths to do so. Maybe months or even years. Maybe she was actively discouraged from indulging because of the stigma that many quirks like hers tend to have. Izuku did not miss the flinch from his doppelganger, and he frowned. Not only that, but the way she addressed me in those brief moments where she wasn't fiending for her next fix. She knew exactly who I was, and it felt like a cry for help. I don't think I have to describe to you the sheer magnitude of the leap you're taking here, Izuku, Inko stressed. I know, Izuku responded. But what kind of hero would I be if I ignored a blatant case of someone never getting the help or support they clearly needed? What kind of hero would I be if I just handed her over to the police and washed my hands of it? Izuku went quiet for a moment. Then he looked back at his mother. What if the sludge villain could have been helped? Izuku. His mother began in concern. The girl in question, having shed the Izuku disguise into a pile of sludge, silently watched the back and forth. She didn't know what to say or if she should say anything at all. She knew who Izuku was and why he had garnered a small level of notoriety. On some level, she knew exactly why she had chosen to target him that night beyond her violent urges. But was she truly ready for that? The discussion between mother and son was interrupted by a loud crash from the street. The two turned away from the captive girl to investigate, and they were nearly run over by a pickup truck whizzing past them, followed by several police cars. No one can stop Team Reservoir Dogs. The four men in the truck shouted together with a cash register still attached to an entire store counter sitting in the bed of the truck. Are you gonna? Izuku trailed off while looking towards his mother. I never officially came out of retirement, Inko began as the truck crashed again, this time as a result of a solid mass slamming down onto the hood. That mass revealed itself to be the grinning visage of Mirko, and the police used the opportunity to swarm the criminals. And they look like they've got things covered over there. Izuku nodded, oddly feeling a chill run up his spine at the sight of the rabbit hero, and he turned back into the alley to check on his charge, but she was not where he had left her. The only thing left in the alley was the discarded rope that she had apparently escaped from. Shit, he cursed and ran into the alley to see if she were potentially hiding somewhere until they left, but she was nowhere to be found. She had legitimately given them the slip in that brief moment where their attention was elsewhere. She's gone? Inko asked in mild panic. And she took the damn miso paste, Izuku shouted. The next day was their official return to school. The morning was wet and gloomy, and Izuku really hoped that it wasn't an omen for the rest of the day. But that would be tested when he bumped into Ida at the lockers where the boy was putting away his raincoat and rain boots. Good morning, Midoriya, Ida cheerily greeted, much to Izuku's confusion. Morning, Ida, he replied. Hey, if it's about my brother, don't be concerned, he calmly interrupted, sending a pleasant smile to his friend. I'm sorry if I made you worry with the lack of contact. Everything will be fine. Izuku watched the boy walk away in silence. Ida sounded normal despite the circumstances, but there was something in his eyes that gave Izuku pause. He couldn't quite identify it, and it was entirely possible that he had just imagined it, but it still put him on edge. He'd be sure to keep a close eye out for his friend. Class 1 was filled with chatter about the aftermath of the sports festival when Izuku arrived, and he quietly slinked his way to his seat amidst the conversations. He spotted Bakugo looking rather dejectedly at the wall, and he met eyes with Todoroki, who sent him a respectful nod that Izuku returned with a small smile. Soon enough, Aizawa entered and the class quickly found their seats. and all were surprised to see that he was out of his bandages. "Ribbit, Aizawa, you don't have bandages anymore," Tsu observed. "That's good news." "The old lady went a little overboard in her treatment," he sighed. "Anyway, we have a big class today on hero informatics." The class was initially on edge at the announcement, as hero informatics was a vague descriptor that could entail a lot of boring or overcomplicated matters. "It's time to pick your hero identities," Aizawa finished. And, just like that, the tension vanished and the class was excited again. This is related to the pro-hero draft picks that I mentioned in our last class together. Normally, you all wouldn't have to worry about the draft yet, as that usually only concerns second and third years, but your class is different. By extending internship offers to first years like yourselves, pros are essentially investing in your potential much earlier on. Is that because we've already encountered villains in our short tenure here? Izuku asked. Pretty much, Aizawa confirmed. You all already have more practical experience than anyone else in your position, and that inherently makes you more valuable. Any offers you receive can still be rescinded, though, assuming their interest in you dies down before graduation. So, what you're saying is that we'll still have to prove ourselves after we've been recruited, Toru surmised. Exactly, Aizawa nodded. Now, here are the totals for those of you who got offers from pros. He pressed a button on a remote, and a screen cut on to display the students who got offers and how many they received. Unsurprisingly, Todoroki, Izuku, and Bakugo were the top three with thousands of offers each, and then there was a massive drop-off for the rest of them. Usually, the numbers are more spread out, but there's a pretty big gap this time around, Aizawa stated. Holy hell, Mina gawked, and several others around her nodded their agreement. Todoroki and Midoriya got the most, even ahead of Bakugo, Gyro asked. Yeah, it's the opposite of how they technically placed in the festival, Kirishima commented. There was no winner, Bakugo grumbled. Doesn't matter, anyway. Yaoyorozu sighed at her number of offers, and she turned to Todoroki beside her. It's amazing that you received so many. You must be proud. Those offers are probably just because of my father, he sullenly replied. I wouldn't be so sure about that, Izuku turned and offered the boy. We did blow up the ring. Todoroki considered that for a few seconds before he shrugged in acquiescence. The amount of offers you received is amazing as well, Midoriya, Yaoyorozu said with a smile. You both have over 4,000. I read more than a few articles written about me yesterday, so it doesn't really surprise me, he shrugged. Right, bask in your fame, Mr. Celebrity, Minta grumbled. Please stop, Izuku replied, now totally deflated. Despite these results, Aizawa continued, wrangling the attention of the class once more, you'll all be interning with pros, got it? Even those of you who didn't get any offers will be interning with someone. Like I mentioned before, you've already had experience with combat against actual villains, but it'll still be helpful to see pros at work out in the wild. And for that, we'll need hero names, Sato excitedly spoke, and their teacher nodded. Your hero names will most likely be temporary, but take them seriously, otherwise. You'll have hell to pay later, Midnight cheerily declared as she strutted into the room, garnering the attention of most of the boys in the room. What you pick today could be your code name for life, so be careful, otherwise you might end up with something utterly indecent. Yeah, she has a point, Aizawa confirmed while climbing into his sleeping bag. Codenames are important. They help reinforce your image and show people exactly what kind of hero you are and what you represent. What kind of hero I want to be what I represent, were the simultaneous thoughts of Todoroki and Izuku, respectively. Names aren't really my forte, Aizawa says before slumping against the wall in his sleeping bag, so Midnight will have final approval over them. Izuku grabbed the white board that was handed to him, and he brainstormed several ideas. The first to be discarded was Small Might, of course, and somewhere in the building, he could just feel his mother snickering at him. Now students, who among you is ready to share? Midnight asked, and Aoyama was the first to take the plunge. Hold your breath, he began, and the class leaned forward in anticipation. I am the shining hero. I cannot stop twinkling. Mon ami, you cannot deny my sparkle. What? It'll be better this way, Midnight said as she adjusted what he wrote on the board and handed it back to him. Take out the I and shorten the cannot to can't. What the F? Okie dokie, let me give it a go. Mina bounced up to the podium. My codename is Alien Queen. Hold on, like that horrifying monster with the acidic blood? I don't think so, Midnight quickly denied, much to Mina's dismay. What about Venus? Izuku spoke up, and both Mina and Midnight, as well as the rest of the class, turned to him. Venus? Mina asked in confusion. Well, it rains sulfuric acid there, and it fits with your whole alien motif, he sheepishly explained. Just figured I'd throw something out there. It also probably won't get you sued. It's fantastic, Midnight declared. Venus, I love it, Mina beamed. Great job, Midori. No prob, Izuku said with a shaky thumbs up, not at all expecting her to adopt the nickname Toru had given him as well. Tsu decided to step up to the plate next. I've had this one picked out since grade school. Rainy season hero, Froppy. Everyone loved that one, and it emboldened the rest of the class to go up and present their own. Kirishima chose the sturdy hero, Red Riot, as a way to pay homage to his idol, the chivalrous hero, Crimson Riot. Izuku liked that one, and he liked Earphone Jack, Tentacle, and Cellophane as well. Tailman and Invisible Girl were a little on the nose, but he wouldn't begrudge them for it. Sugarman and Chargebolt were nice, and he really enjoyed Creati and Tsukayomi as well. Then Todoroki stepped up, and his board only read, Shoto. Just your name? Midnight questioned. Not just my name, Todoroki answered with a glance to Izuku, but, in essence, yes. Izuku knew exactly what he was going for with his name, and he couldn't help the grin that sprouted on him. When Todoroki was walking back to his seat, Izuku raised his fist to the heterochromatic teen. Excellent choice, he said while he held his fist out to him. Todoroki, however, did not move, and he only stared at the offered fist in confusion. Izuku looked bemusedly at him for a moment before he realized what was happening. Oh, it's a fist bump, he explained to the confused teen. We, bump fists. In solidarity? Todoroki pondered. Sure, I guess that applies here, too, Izuku answered, and Todoroki slowly met Izuku's fist with his own. After a horrifyingly awkward few seconds, Todoroki nodded in new understanding before returning to his seat. Izuku, fortunately or unfortunately, did not notice that the entire class had stopped to watch the interaction with barely contained laughter. Ochako had quickly stepped up to prevent herself from bursting at the adorable scene with her hero name of Uravity. Mainta excitedly followed with grape juice, and Koda silently followed with anima. And then Bakugo stepped up to the podium with King Explosion Murder. I'm gonna say that one's a little too violent, Midnight denied. Huh? What do you mean? He shouted in protest. Why don't you go with Explosion Boy? Kirishima heckled. Shut it, shitty hair, he retorted. Izuku looked back down to his whiteboard at the name he chose and tuned out the death threats Bakugo sent his classmate. He still wasn't entirely sure that it was a great name on its own, but he knew exactly what he wanted to represent, and he could finally say that he knew exactly what kind of hero he wanted to be. Seeing that he was the only one left aside from Bakugo and Ada, he decided to step up. Most of you have probably seen that interview by now, and maybe some of you saw all the articles that were written about me these last few days, Izuku began, somewhat losing his nerve the more he spoke. He took a deep breath and shook off the trepidation before continuing. Well, a few different articles coined a nickname for me, and it was a pretty good representation of the hero I want to become, so I went with it. With steely resolve taking over his face, he flipped his board around to show the class. I'm the Kaleidoscope hero, Beacon. I want to be a beacon that shines a light for anyone lost in the darkness that needs a helping hand out of it. I love it, Midnight cheered. It's so fitting. She wasn't the only one, as his classmates joined in the revelry, complimenting his codename and assuaging his worries about it. The smile he got from Ochako and nods he received from Todoroki and even Takoyami warmed his heart. Meanwhile, Ida stared intently at the board in front of him as he thought back to the last conversation he had with his brother in the hospital. Tensei roughly began in his hospital bed with his brother by his side. I wasn't sure if I wanted to say anything yesterday, but hiding it from you won't miraculously help me walk again, so I might as well come out and say it. Wait, walk? Ida frantically questioned. What do you mean? Right, walk. I won't be doing that for a while, probably ever. I can't feel my legs, they're practically useless. Ida choked back a sob, and he tried desperately to compose himself. As tactless as ever, elder brother, he bitterly attempted to inject some levity to the situation. Tensei softly smiled. If I can't poke fun at my own situation, how could I ever convince anyone else not to worry? Of course, we're worried, Ida tried to reason, and the sobs began to escape him. Tenya, he began. The hero, Ingenium, is finished, at least for me. No, don't talk like that, Ida pleaded. You still have so many people to help and inspire. Brother, this can't be true. Not me, you. What? I know that you look up to me more than maybe anything else in this world. If I can't inspire anyone in my career, I at least know with absolute certainty that I inspired you, intentionally or not. That's why even if I go down, Ingenium doesn't have to go down with me. I want Ingenium to live on through you, little brother. I want you to go out and save and inspire people just like you believe that I do. Be the hero you were born to be, Tenya. I can't, Tensei. Not until the man who did this to you is dead. Until then, I'm still just... You're using your real name, too? Midnight asked the sullen boy at the podium, and he only silently nodded. Izuku looked on with concern. His friend was not okay, and he was suffering in silence. Izuku looked across the room to Ochako, and he could see the concern on her face, too. They shared a glance and nodded, coming to a decision. Lord Explosion Murder, Bakugo shouted from the podium. No, Midnight deadpanned, and Bakugo returned to his seat once more in a huff. Now that just about everyone has decided on hero names, Aizawa spoke up from his sleeping bag, we can return to talking about your upcoming internships. They'll last for 1 week. As for who you'll be working with, those of you who are on the board will choose from among your offers. Everyone else will have a different list. About 40 different agencies across the country have agreed to take on interns from your class. Each agency focuses on a different area of expertise, so keep that in mind when making your decision. Once the bell had rung, the class was left to make their decisions and hand them in before the weekend. A few in the room already had an idea about where they wanted to go, while others were still mulling it over. Izuku was perusing through the long list of heroes that made him offers, and he was surprised to see that he had actually gotten an offer from Endeavor's agency, though he supposed that he should have seen it coming after the strange encounter they had during the sports festival. Endeavor wasn't the only surprising name, as he got offers from several heroes in the top 10, Best Jeanist and Hawk's chief among them. What really surprised him was the offer he received from Sir Nightai. All Might's former sidekick extended him an offer. Maybe it had to do with All Might declaring him to be a future symbol. There might have been some unintentional implications with that, but he just set the record straight again in that regard if needed. Eventually, he narrowed his selection down to a few names. He begrudgingly accepted that Endeavor could teach him quite a bit about wielding his fire offensively, especially from range, but the problem was that he was Endeavor. Hawks could likely do a lot for him in regards to pure speed, but Hawks was literally flight-oriented, and Izuku couldn't fly, no matter how much his classmates tried to make Rainbow Comet a thing. Sir Nightai was much more informatics and investigation-based than the others, and he was certain that the man would be a wealth of knowledge in the realm of investigative heroics. But his agency was so small that it perplexed Izuku that the man even sent him an offer to begin with. Then there was Miss Joke. He wasn't expecting one from her since she taught at a rival hero school, but he was certainly interested. She was proficient in close combat even without the aid of her quirk, but she had also cultivated an approachable image with her goofy and cheerful personality. More than anything, becoming someone that people on the fringes of society would feel comfortable reaching out to and accepting help from was paramount to him. He heard Ochako talking to others about her choice of the wild pussycats, and he looked over to Ida quickly and quietly writing his selection down. He looked back to his own sheet and made his selection as well. When the school day concluded, Izuku and Ochako went to invite Ida to walk to the train station with them, but he had already left. In the teacher's lounge, Aizawa was sifting through the internship forms he had already gotten back. He quirked an eyebrow when he saw his totally not favorite student's form. "Joke, huh?" he mused. "That's surprising. I expected someone a little more explosive. She should be good for him, though." Continuing on, his brow furrowed when he saw Ida's form. He only selected one. He must have gotten better offers than this one. He zeroed in on the location, and things started to fall into place for him. A hero agency in Hasu. Damn it, Ida, don't tell me you're planning on doing something stupid. The next day, Izuku meandered through the halls of UA toward his weekly session with Hound Dog. It had only been a few weeks since the incident, and even though the dreams hadn't gotten any better, he felt like the sessions were definitely helping him come to grips with things in the waking world. When he reached Hound Dog's office, he sat down in a chair just outside of the door and signed in for his appointment. A few minutes later, the door opened, and none other than Bakugo stepped outside of the office. The two were very surprised to see each other. Bakugo couldn't ascertain why Izuku would need to see Hound Dog, and Izuku never pegged Bakugo as someone who would ever consider talking to a professional about, well, anything. "Bakugo?" Izuku questioned. "You're seeing Hound Dog?" The blonde grunted in the affirmative. "Part of my requirements. From after the battle trials." Izuku immediately understood and nodded. "Oh, gotcha." "It helps," Bakugo muttered, and Izuku was definitely not expecting that. "The hell are you doing here?" Izuku looked at him strangely for a moment before he realized that the blonde wouldn't have known about what happened unless he was there to witness it. There was a villain at the Asti. "Yeah, I know. There were plenty of villains there," Bakugo responded. "Not all of them survived," was Izuku's short reply, and nothing more was said. Bakugo watched the boy step past him into Hound Dog's office with wide eyes. He didn't really know what to say or what to think about that. "Bakugo," a familiar voice snapped him out of his thoughts, and the blonde turned to see his homeroom teacher approaching him. "Have you decided on who you're interning with?" "Not yet," he muttered. "Why?" "Someone at UA personally requested to have you intern with them over the week," he answered, and Bakugo was intrigued. "Think of it as your last obligation before returning to heroics classes." Aizawa handed him a sheet of paper. Bakugo read the name that was on it, and he paled. "I don't have a choice, do I?" "I thought that was obvious," Aizawa answered. "You don't have to travel anywhere, just come to school at the regular time next week. Don't worry about finding her, she'll find you." Bakugo sighed in resignation as his teacher turned and left, and only then did he notice that the purple kid from the sports festival was silently trailing behind him. The two briefly locked eyes before he scuttled on behind Aizawa. HMPH, guess he's building that spaceship or whatever. After his session with Hound Dog, Izuku had one more stop to make before he left for the weekend to prepare for his internship. When he neared the development studio, he barely made it to the door before an explosion blew it off its hinges, and he narrowly dodged being pancaked by the new projectile. He wasn't able to dodge the body that crashed into him afterward, though. When he opened his eyes, he saw soot-covered pink dreadlocks under a familiar pair of goggles, and recognition instantly hit him. When the girl saw who she landed on, the same recognition hit her. "Oh, Mr. 10 million points," the girl remarked with a grin. "You here to see more of my babies?" "Honestly? Yes," Izuku answered. "I also sent in my costume for adjustments and upgrades, and I'm here to pick it up before internships begin." "Oh, 2-in-1, then," she exclaimed. "I personally worked on your costume when Power Loader brought it in. It was the least I could do for the attention you brought to my babies." "Well, I'm glad to have been able to help," Izuku replied with a laugh as the two got up from the floor. "Damn it, Hatsum, that's the fourth explosion this Power Loader began before he saw who she was with, and his blood ran cold. "Oh no, please don't tell me you're here with any more schematics that will make me take up drinking any more than that little gremlin does already." "Not this time," Izuku assured. "I'm here for my costume." "Oh, Hatsum's little pet project, then?" Power Loader nodded, still a bit pale. Not really sure which is worse, in all honesty. "She wanted free rein to do as she pleased with your requests, but I knew that she'd probably get you killed if I allowed that, so I kept an eye on what she added and modified." "Genius requires uninhibited creativity," May shouted in protest. "My blood pressure requires you be monitored to avoid a fifth explosion," Power Loader shot back. "Anyway," she began, shaking off Power Loader's response, "I saw that you requested added support for your arms and legs to reduce some of the damage your quirk does to you when you're going full throttle. While I'm not certain about the specifics of your quirk, if I had to hazard a guess, the different colors allow you different supercharged physical abilities." At Izuku's nod, she grinned and pressed on. "Excellent, so I installed bracers in your arms and legs to reduce the strain when you're going Hulk mode or Speedster mode. The bracers in your arms come attached to brand spanking new gauntlets in lieu of your old gloves. The gauntlets also have shock absorbers to keep your hands extra safe in a tough fight." Izuku marveled at the modifications. The gauntlets themselves were rather sleek too and fit around his hand perfectly, and they had an iridescent finish that suited his identity. His boots, while not metallic, had a heat-resistant, iridescent vinyl finish and knee pads attached, likely as a fixture of the bracers included. "This is amazing," Izuku complimented, to which May's grin grew even more. "I also noticed that you tend to tire yourself out when you're in Speedster mode, and while I don't know exactly what's going on with your quirk when that's happening, I initially opted to include a portable ventilator attached to a respirator I made for you," she started to explain before Power Loader interrupted her. Then it dawned on her that including even a small oxygen tank with your costume would be the quickest way to blow you up whenever you ignited your quirk, he supplied with a smirk. "Trial and error is an essential phase of the engineering design process," she defended, and the support course instructor held up his hands in mock surrender with a chuckle. "Anyway, I ditched the ventilator but kept the respirator in case you ever enter toxic environments. It came at the cost of your cape, but you weren't really interested in holding on to that. Anyway, we'll have to find another way to mitigate the exhaustion you face in Speedster mode. It just now dawned on me that you referred to my green and yellow flames as Hulk mode and Speedster mode, and I'm frankly disappointed in myself for not naming them something that cool sooner," Izuku commented. "Then it appears we make a great team," May responded with a smile. "I'll be coming to you exclusively for any modifications to my costume or support equipment from now on, so I'd definitely agree," Izuku nonchalantly replied. The utter glee on May's face made Power Loader look towards the locked cabinet near his desk, but he wouldn't break out the alcohol just yet. He would remain strong. "Oh," May began once again, "I'm in the process of developing an internal cooling system for your costume in the event that you go Crimson Fury again and flash boil a glacier. But it's slow going, unfortunately. You gave me such a wealth of things to work on, though. And you have created a masterpiece of support technology with this suit," Izuku replied in earnest. When Power Loader saw the interplay between the two, he almost forgot about the fact that the teens in front of him were a step above dangerous criminals as far as support technology was concerned. He did not forget the greenhead's idea for nail clippers, and he never would. However, looking at them in that moment, he only saw two brilliant minds brainstorming and bouncing ideas off of one another, as well as a support prodigy taking special care to keep her charge as safe and prepared as possible. He wondered if this was what All Might and David Shield were like back in their day, the only difference being if All Might was a genius in his own right. Everyone has their costume, right? Aizawa checked one final time before he would see his students off at the train station. Remember, you don't have permission to wear them out in public yet. And make sure you mind your manners with the other heroes you're interning with. First impressions are crucial in this line of work. Now, get to it. Yes, sir, the class responded before excitedly heading their separate ways. Ida silently walked away towards a train that would take him to Tokyo, but he was accosted by Izuku and Ochako before he could make it too far. Hey, if you ever need to talk or anything at all, please, just let us know, Izuku stressed to his friend, and Ochako vigorously nodded beside him. Friends are there for each other, right? Ida turned to them and offered them a strained smile. Yes, and thank you both, was all he said before walking away. Izuku still couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was that he saw in Ida's gaze, but he could confirm that it was there, and it wasn't pleasant. He was starting to worry that his friend would do something stupid. He really hoped that wouldn't be the case. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through What If Deku Unleashed God-like quirk that surpassed all. I hope you found it as intriguing and thought-provoking as we did. A big shout-out to DripBayless for crafting such a compelling story. Don't forget to check out their profile on fanfiction.net for more amazing works. The link is in the description below. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to What If Deku 2 for more fascinating explorations into the world of fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we're always excited to hear your thoughts and suggestions in the comments section. See you guys in the next video.